Anytime we have any kind of financial discussion in life, or especially online, whether it be discussions around trading or investing or just saving money, whatever it happens to be, inevitably some of these doomsdayers will show up. These people that will say, the global financial markets are going to collapse, the entire financial system's going to collapse one day, the world's going to end, the world's going to get hit by a meteor strike or something like that, and you're wasting your time trading and investing and saving, whatever it is you're doing, right? It's the other day I made a video about saving money, and I gave you some scenarios where if you, saved a certain amount of money over the next 20 years, you'll have $1,000,000. And inevitably, some of these folks showed up, well, in 20 years, $1,000,000 won't really be $1,000,000 because of inflation. Okay, but still $1,000,000. That's like saying, the people that saved previously before us, that saved and made money, when they finally retired in 20, 30, 40 years and they were sitting on a pile of cash, do they regret saving that money because, that money's not worth as much because of inflation? No, and honestly, you don't need to worry about inflation when you're saving money, especially when you're trading and investing, when you're investing in index funds, market index funds, because like the S&P 500, since like 1957, the S&P 500 has averaged about a 10% return, 10.5% return, which is well above what annual inflation is, right? It's easily going to outpace whatever inflation is. You don't have to worry about inflation when you're trading and investing and saving money. These doomsdayers, though, they are extreme. I actually got one buddy of mine. He talks about, I've got, some of my money obviously in a bank account, in a savings account. I don't have everything tied up in the market. Obviously, I have some cash on hand. Most folks do. And he's like, you can't have all that money in the bank because what happens when the bank collapses? Obviously we had Silicon Valley Bank collapse and all of that earlier, this year or last year. And then, what happens when the bank collapses and you lose all your money? And I'm trying to tell him, well, it's like FDIC. Money is your money in the bank is insured, right? So what are you talking about? Well, what happens when all the banks collapse? Well, if all the banks collapse, then that means the entire U.S. government has collapsed. The entire United States of America as a nation has collapsed, which means the entire financial system worldwide has collapsed. So yeah, I'm going to lose all of my money, but so is everybody else. Like, I'm going to be broke that day, and so is every other person on the planet. Why would I be worried about that? Right? That's not something that I even need to think about. That's such a ridiculous scenario that it doesn't even deserve my time. I've had similar people, make comments about, like U.S. treasuries, like, government bonds and things like that. Is, well, you shouldn't put all your money into bonds either, because what happens when the U.S. defaults on its debt, no longer can pay its debt, and it's not going to pay on those bonds? Well, again, if the U.S. government ever defaults on its debt, that means the U.S. government is essentially in serious trouble. The U.S. government probably has collapsed at that point, and I've got more things to worry about then I didn't get, my money back on the bonds I bought, or I didn't, or I lost all the money in my savings account, or like we've got much more serious problems than money at that point. At that point, chances are the world is in total and complete chaos. There's probably like a worldwide war at that point. Like if something that serious has happened, the world is in complete and total shambles. And the last thing I'm worried about is how much money I'm making with my stock positions and option positions. What kind of interest I'm getting on my money sitting in my savings account. Like there's other things to worry about at that point. The biggest reason I don't worry about these doomsday scenarios is because for the most part, any kind of doomsday scenario people come up with, for the most part, we've already faced it. We've already been through that. There is a lot more evidence that the global financial markets will persist. It will live on into the future than it's going to collapse tomorrow. Because like the U.S. markets, which are essentially a global market, we've had our markets for more than 2 centuries now, right? So it has staying power, right? It has a real staying power. It's not like it's so fragile it's just going to collapse and disappear tomorrow. No. And think of all the horrible scenarios that we've already experienced and we were fine with. Just in my lifetime, And of course, I wasn't necessarily trading through all of these events, but in my lifetime, I mean, lived through the last 15 years or so of the Cold War, the 87 stock market crash, the dot-com burst, the 9/11 attacks, the global financial crisis, the Great Recession, and obviously COVID here recently, right? And the markets were fine through all those events, right? The markets, they had a serious drawback from all those events, but they were fine in the end, right? We got through it. It's not like that, we haven't faced the fire before and been all right. One of the things I really remember is Y2K. Y2K, everybody thought like all the computers were going to stop working on January 1st, 2000. All the computers just going to shut down. The entire world was going to collapse because of this Y2K bug that was in every computer on the planet, right? That was the theory, right? And literally nothing happened. Y2K was a non-event, but I had one buddy of mine, like he was a serious prepper, and he really believed Y2K was going to end the world, and he was going to be ready for it because, he had me, I would go over to his house and he was stockpiling water and sugar and salt and, dry goods, dry beans and canned goods. Like he was stockpiling a lot of stuff, fuel. Right. And he was ready for the end of the world. And he was telling me, I was a skeptic. I was like, there's no way any of this is going to amount to anything. But he's like, oh, yeah. And when it happens, you need to come to my house because I'll be ready. So when everything is going to hell, come to my place. Well, obviously that day rolled around, nothing happened. And he ended up with just like a underground storage bunker full of all of this stuff, all of these MREs and all this food and fuel and things that he didn't need, right? So, but he was prepared for it because he was certain that was the day. That was when the world was going to end. And the point of today's video is really, you guys, if you have this kind of doomsday kind of mindset, especially when it comes to financial topics like trading, investing, savings, guys, you got to get over that, because honestly, you're doing yourself a major disservice if you are not doing the responsible things with your money because of some possible end of the world scenario that probably will never happen. But even if it does, none of this matters anyway. Like literally nothing in life matters if the world ends tomorrow. If the world gets hit by a meteor strike tomorrow, then it just doesn't matter what any of us do today, right? But let's imagine that meteor strike doesn't happen. Wouldn't it be nice if you actually had saved a little money, planned for your retirement, planned for the future, doing responsible things like, getting out of debt, all the things you need to be doing in life. So I think a lot of people just use these kinds of doomsday scenarios to be irresponsible in life. And I don't want you guys to be that way. Anyway, peace, guys.